Could the Sixers look to trade down in this year's NBA draft? That's a question we are going to explore here on today's show. If they do not land a top 4 pick and they keep that pick at either 5 or 6, would it be smart to try to trade down a little bit on that draft board? Going to explore that here today. Before we get into it, be sure to give me a follow over on social media. We have an Instagram account for the channel at 76ers Now IG, as well as my personal Twitter/X account at Jake Chipper. Plenty more Sixers content and Sixers coverage over on those social media platforms. And as we get closer and closer to the draft and the off season, I'm always talking Sixers. So if you want even more coverage and just have a conversation, have some questions about the Sixers, go give me a follow over on Instagram and on Twitter. So, trading down. Does it make sense for Philadelphia? I think trading down in this year's NBA draft does make sense for Daryl Morey and the 76ers if they do not land a top 4 pick and they pick at either number 5 or number 6. To me, there is a clear top 4 in this year's draft. Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, and VJ Edgecombe. Those would be the top 4 picks. So if you do not land one of those 4 guys, I think it makes sense to move down the board a little bit because after those 4, we're not really sure who that next guy is. There's kind of a group of players who could be the picks at 5 and 6. A couple of good guards like Trey Johnson, Kasparis Yakachonis, a couple of good centers like Kaman Malawach and Derek Queen, but I'm not sure any of them are really the ideal pick and the ideal fit for the 76ers. So in my mind, if you're at 5 or 6, you could trade down with a team that might want one of those guards or one of those centers more than the Sixers do, acquire future assets, whether that's another pick in this year's draft or maybe a future pick in another draft, and still get a player you like. Because there's some players in that 10 to 14 range that I think fit the Sixers better than maybe some of these guys at 5 or 6. So trading down certainly on the table if the Sixers do land at number 5 or number 6. Now, before we get into some of these prospects that I like in that range that I think might be even better picks than somebody like a Trey Johnson or a Kaman Malawach for the Sixers, I want to ask you if they are not top 4 specifically, because I think if the Sixers are top 4, you stick and you pick, hopefully get an Ace Bailey or VJ Edgecombe if you do get number 4. But if you're not in that top 4, I think it makes sense. But what do you think? Should the Sixers trade down if they're not in that range? Give me a Y for yes or an N for no. Now, of course, it does take 2 teams to make a deal. Just because I want to trade down doesn't mean you actually can. You're going to need to find another team willing to move up. And of course, as I mentioned, after that top 4, it does drop down a little bit. But there are some teams looking at the draft order that I think would be willing to move up for certain players. The Toronto Raptors at 7, if they stay at 7 or even fall in the lottery, I think they're all in on getting their next big man, whether that's Kaman Malawach or Derek Queen. So I think they'd be willing to move up for one of those guys to ensure that they land their center of the future. The Portland Trail Blazers, they're a team that's been linked a little bit to Kasparis Yakachonis, and I don't think he's going to be there at number 10. Same with the Miami Heat. They really need that point guard of the future to pair up with Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo. I think they'd be very interested in coming up to 5 or 6 for somebody like Kasparis Yakachonis as well. And the Chicago Bulls seem to be all in on Kaman Malawach out of Duke at number 12. Even though we had a bad showing against Houston, don't think there's a chance he falls that far. So they could potentially be interested in coming up as well to jump a team like the Toronto Raptors for the center of their choosing. Now, if the Sixers do move down, ideally in that 10 through 12-ish range, there's a couple of guys that I'm looking at down the board that I think would be very, very good picks and very good fits, more importantly, for the Sixers, because I think they want a player that can help them more so right away and a player that fits into their rotation on that wing spot. The first guy that I'm looking at, Asa Newell out of Georgia. Stands at 6'11", 220, and just 19 years old. So good size, and of course a younger player there that you hope can develop in your system. This year for the Georgia Bulldogs, just over 15 points a game, about 7 rebounds, shooting 53% or 54% from the field, just under 30% from 3. And what I really like about Asa Newell's game, a lot of strengths that he showed in his 1 year at Georgia. An explosive leaper who has shown skills finishing at the rim. He's got soft hands. Once he gets that ball down low, he's not going to give it up. He does a good job keeping it high, and he's a talented finisher there at the rim. And he's shown a potential for a jumper. Not a primary weapon yet, but he's got a good-looking shot. He's got that nice push shot and a good free throw, so the signs are there for potentially developing an outside shot, which would totally open up his game. Also, a good rim protector. Uses that length, uses that athleticism to be a disruptor there, and also a good help defender down there on the low block as well. Also can guard out there on the perimeter, though. He's not just this big plotting big that only can defend the rim. At 6'11", 220, he can switch on the perimeter and switch on screens, which is so important in today's NBA. And look, I know Sixers fans are going to love this. He is a hustle player, always giving it his all. He's never going to take a play off 110% on the floor at all times, which for the Sixers, you play in the city of Philadelphia, that is a necessity for any young guy coming in looking to get minutes. Now, of course, he does come with his concerns as well, as all these players do. The passing is a little bit of a concern for someone like Asa Newell. Does tend to get a little careless with the ball, gets stripped, making bad passes, limits him a little bit when you're running that pick and roll and he gets that ball near the elbow. Doesn't always make the best decisions, so he'll have to improve there. Despite being a talented defender, skill-wise, the discipline isn't always there. Commits some avoidable fouls. The rotations aren't always perfect, but that's the kind of thing you would expect from a younger player, something he can develop as he grows in the league. And the shooting production, this is really where people differ with Asa Newell and what his true upside is, because although, as I mentioned, he has a good-looking jumper and there's certainly upside for him to develop that side of the floor, made under 30% of his jumpers as a freshman. So unless he proves he can extend that range, again, has to show it, can't just be the potential for it. Ability to space the floor isn't going to be great. And then it's like, well, where do you play him? Because I don't think you really want to play him as a true center. I think fits better as a 4. But if you're going to play the 4 for me in today's NBA, you have to be able to space the court. When I look at sort of the kind of player he could turn into, I think Brandon Clark is a pretty good comp for someone like Asa Newell. Similar bodies, similar skill sets. And look, Brandon Clark has carved out a pretty decent role for the Memphis Grizzlies. Someone who developing that jumper, an athletic guy who can play the 4, play the 5. Although if Newell can develop that jumper even more, he could be almost a better version of Brandon Clark. And look, if that jumper does never come, Jonathan Isaac type of player who definitely has limits offensively, but one of the best defenders in the NBA, can guard, honestly, 1 through 5. And that's the kind of skill set you could be getting from Asa Newell on the defensive end. At least that defensive ability, the finishing ability, enough to get minutes in the NBA, even if that shot and that offense never truly comes around. I got 2 more prospects that I like for the Sixers. If they do trade back a little bit, but before we get there, hit that sub button, join the family here at 76ers Now for the best Sixers coverage here on YouTube. With this offseason being so critical for the Sixers and their future, they cannot mess up this year's draft. If they do keep that top 6 protected pick, you're not going to want to miss a single thing, and we got it covered for you here at 76ers Now. Just surpassed 21,200 subscribers. Thank you to all of our real ones who have subscribed over the past couple of months and have joined the channel. So if you haven't yet and you're enjoying the content you're seeing here today, I encourage you to go ahead and hit that sub button. Before we get to these 2 players, got to give a shout out to today's sponsor, and that is Game Time, the best and only place you should be going to getting tickets to all your sporting events, concerts, comedy shows, and a whole lot more. Game Time specializes in last-minute tickets at the lowest prices guaranteed, and prices actually drop as the events get closer, so you don't have to worry about paying these outrageous prices for your tickets. You can see the views from your seat before you buy, so you know what to expect when you arrive. You don't have to buy a ticket and then it's like, wow, my view is not what I thought it was going to be. Game Time lets you see it before you even get to the arena or the stadium. And Game Time makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices. I encourage you to toggle the all-in pricing feature. Shows you the total upfront, so there's no surprise fees at checkout. With the MLB season in full swing, the Phillies are off to a hot 8-3 start after beating the Atlanta Braves last night thanks to a Trey Turner home run in the 9th. They'll be on the road against the Braves, against the Cardinals, but then they return home to take on the San Francisco Giants, who have also been very good this season. So if you're looking to go to a Phillies game, shoot, even the day of, that's the best way to get your tickets over on the Game Time app. So be sure to download the Game Time app and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. If you download the app, create an account, and use our code CHATSPORTS, you get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code CHATSPORTS for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Another guy I like if the Sixers do end up trading down, Collin Murray-Boyles out of South Carolina. 6'8", 245, just 19 years old. And for the Gamecocks this past season, just under 17 points, over 8 rebounds a game, 2.5 assists, and a productive player for a pretty poor team in South Carolina, but a player that has been rising up boards a little bit, and at one point thought to maybe go in the later teens. Now could be number 10, number 11, but not someone I'd be targeting at number 5, and that's why I like this idea of trading down. Where he excels, another player that excels in the defensive end of the floor. His versatility defensively, one of the best defenders to enter the draft really in the past couple of years, and he's not a very vertical athlete, but his intellect, his IQ, his strength, he can guard almost 1 through 5 as well, similar to Asa Newell. Got great hand-eye coordination, great reaction, always seems to get hands on tip passes and forces turnovers. Great rebounder as well, uses that strength. He's got a nose for the ball, can really attack the glass. Also a good post playmaking hub, and what I mean by that, gets the ball in the post, as opposed to Asa Newell, who gets the ball in that short roll and might make a bad pass or a bad decision. Murray-Boyles seems to always make the right decision and make a good play, and a good interior scorer as well. As I mentioned, with that strength, smooth footwork, can get it up inside. Now, concern with Murray-Boyles as well, similar to Asa Newell, is that shooting. But Murray-Boyles, a little bit worse. He's kind of a liability right now from the outside. Wasn't a good shooter in high school. Doesn't really have that touch, so not something I'd really ever bet on him to develop. And a little bit of a tweener at 6'8". The fit's really going to matter because he's not tall, he's not explosive either, and he hasn't proven he can shoot. So this is more of what can he do defensively and use that versatility to overcome where he might not be a very traditional fit on the floor. But a lot of this, what we're talking about, sounds a little bit like Draymond Green when he was coming out of Michigan State. Their defense is really the most comparable things here. Draymond coming out, with that size, also a bit of a tweener, and the shot was a big question mark. Now, Draymond's shot, especially in his prime, did really come around, but we're also talking about a player here who can really make an impact on the defensive end of the floor. And then even a little bit on the lower end, a player like Paul Millsap, who was an all-star once upon a time, solid, versatile backup, especially once he developed that 3 in his prime, was a very, very good player for the Atlanta Hawks. So I think when you think about the player Murray-Boyles could turn into, you hope he does develop that shot, play solid defense, and I think would be a very good skill set Sixers could use at that wing spot. A little bit of a different player here now. Third prospect we're talking about today, possibly trading down for, Liam McNeeley, somebody who was a little bit higher on a lot of draft boards coming into the season and had a little bit of a tough year for UConn, 6'7", 210. But the big thing with McNeeley, he was tabbed, and he is a very good shooter, but shot just 31.7% from 3 this past year for UConn. Not what you want to see for someone whose best skill set is that spot-up shooting. Now, he still is a good spot-up shooter, right? And as that three-point marksman, an elite shooter off the catch at high school, again, didn't quite shoot that same level in college, but look, at his best, he's getting those open looks, coming off screens, catch and shoot, he's knocking them down. And he pairs that with good off-ball movement. So he's able to utilize off-ball screens and get to the right spots to get his shots. And he does have some scoring upside. Didn't have the best year scoring at the rim for UConn, but he had a 38-point game against Creighton, displayed his potential to score from all over the floor. So he showed flashes of that, but he has to do more of it. Good connective playmaker as well. Not someone you're going to give the ball to and say, go get me a bucket or go make the right play, but decent enough handle, showed some ability to run the pick and roll, so you can at least give him the ball and he won't, just fumble it all the time. And somebody that you can at least trust a little bit to not just keep the ball in one place, so keep it moving around the floor. Now, where he really needs to grow if McNeely wants to be an elite shooter in this league is shooting on the move, shooting off the dribble, and really creating his own shot. That's where the upside could be through the roof if he can develop these kind of skills, but hasn't shown the ability really to get the ball, go off the dribble, pull up from the mid-range, or pull up on a three-pointer off the bounce. Again, decent handle, but the results just have not been there. Same thing with shot creation, creating his own shot. While he can do some decent things with the ball in his hands, he just not quite a tight enough handle to deal with pressure. If someone's, a good defender really up, crowding his space, he's not going to put together some flashy moves and get by the defender or get to his shot. So a little more limited in that aspect. And I think that pairs with his lack of athleticism. Not really a quick first step, not a great driver exploding towards the basket. And so you're really relying on that shot to fall because lateral quickness, average at best. Defensively, it's a concern as well. And, that's something you're really projecting to improve at the NBA level. That's why developing some of these other skills offensively is so important for his game. Very similar to a player like Keegan Murray was coming out of college. Someone who you always had hoped could do more things than just shooting the ball, but hasn't quite developed those aspects of his game. But, man, he can hit that three. And despite the concerning shooting numbers, I think McNeely will be a better three-point shooter in the NBA than he was in college. And look, if some of that stuff really never comes around and doesn't translate, even a player like Corey Kispert, who we've talked about as a trade target for the Sixers in the past, being that off-ball weapon, someone who could fit very well in this offense that really has been devoid of very good catch-and-shoot three-point shooters ever since J.J. Redick left. Of course, Jared McCain did show those flashes coming off the injury, but you can never have enough of those guys in today's NBA. So if the Sixers do end up trading down, again, a move I think would be smart and kind of falls in with their plans of maximizing this window they still have, or at least think they have, with Joel Embiid, who would you target? Is one of the three names I mentioned. Of course, there's plenty of other prospects that you could be interested in. So if they do trade down, who should they target? Let me know in the comments section right now.